Good evening. I'm Mr. DeMarcus Bell. I'm the educator of the scholars here from Eagle Academy. We have a leadership and social justice class.
Thank
I
you.
just want to say thank you so much for having us and having this. As someone who is finding myself more in scholarship and academia, I'm noticing what feels like a saturation with almost a deficit perspective when it comes to the African American experience. And I try to do, through my own work on a daily basis, to acknowledge and affirm the, innate genius and beauty that every African American person or child has. And I'm wondering how can we create more, how you all think we can create more space like that in the literature, where we can, work in the space of possibility, as Dr. Whaley, in some of the things he said, finding things that are working and expanding there, as opposed to, perpetuating the problematization of so many of the things that are happening.
Yeah, I think I'm in agreement with you. I think that one of the things, I tend to do a lot of different things, and I'm sort of a one-man show. And one of the things I also do, in addition to the work with Mr. McQueen, is I mentor informally, because I'm not affiliated with an academic institution, other folks who are coming out of PhD programs or who are young assistant professors. And part of what I try to do is when I work with them, usually they're folks of color, I try to encourage them and share with them what I consider my experience, which is very liberating. It doesn't pay a lot, but it's very liberating. And I think that part of what we have to do is we have to educate our young people coming out of school to not be afraid to use their lived experiences as a foundation for their scholarship. I did away with the idea of objectivity a long time ago. And one of the things you'll look, if you see my scholarship, you'll see that in every part of it, I've had some kind of experience or something is connected to it through my lived experience. And I think that that's part of what needs to happen in terms of encouraging young people to really not only use the social science literature and other literatures to make their case for the kind of research they're doing, but also look inside their communities and inside their experiences and use that as a part of the information that informs their scholarship.
And I'll just represent, just for a moment, part of what I believe Professor Christopher Emden would have said if he were able to be here, and that involves his reality pedagogy. Okay, so we know him in terms of his work in the area of hip-hop ed and the science genius battle. So the idea is that, youth are going to compose hip-hop from their lived experience, which is really what Dr. Whaley is saying. So the reality is exactly as you said. There are too many sources that are going to have a deficit view of black people. What's wrong with them? What's missing? Put down insult, injury, put down insult, injury. And so it is from the voice of empowered youth that we hear their genius. And because you have been listening to them, you're immediately affirming the genius that they are. And so it's really people like you who are in the classroom, who see someone's face when they walk in, at 8, 10 in the morning and can sense that, yo, man, what's up? Did something happen? And to affirm instead their strengths, regardless of what challenges they may have had. Maybe because somebody just got shot. Maybe because there's a family issue. But it's about each of us taking on the role, and even youth, peer mentoring. What does it mean to be, somebody's brother? What does it mean to be somebody's friend? It's that you can affirm them. Oh, man, I just got a 78 on my test. Oh, well, what do you got to do? What were you doing last night? Oh, man, come study with me. We can knock it out next time. So it's about affirming each other's strengths and providing that social support. And so it's not going to be about seeing more in the literature or seeing more that's written. It may be in your own poetry that affirms who you are, and in the sharing of it and in the affirmation of teachers and peers that we're going to get the solution that we need, which is to how do we build each other up.
I just say that I think it's important, especially now, for young people to become activists, advocates, activists, The 2020 presidential election is going to be momentous. I think that's the least that one can say. There will be all kinds of drives to get people to register to vote and to show up on voting day. Of all the things that young folk can do, getting involved in something like that, turning out the vote, knowing enough about what candidates are saying so that they can speak knowledgeably about what's likely to have a positive impact on the community and what's not. I mean, at any level that has young people becoming engaged, it seems to me that's its own positivity. What I worry about most, because I agree with your notions about how the images out here are all negative, is if folks basically see that their job is to sit around and complain, to have their voices be a part of the chorus that says, yeah, black folks ain't blank. The moment they become engaged in something where they're actively trying to build community, where they're trying to get community engagement, I think your sense of yourself and your sense of the community shifts. The key moment for me in the civil rights movement was in the 1960s when you had students suddenly saying, you know, we have real engagement in this. So the formation of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee was one of the ways in which, at least in my own experience, you really saw people turn the negativity of what was associated with segregation into something that was really hugely positive.
My name is Jordan Lindsay. My question is for Dr. Willie. So when you were speaking, you said that in your conclusion that academic partnerships is something that youth in school should be introduced. So my question is, how do you introduce such a topic to like black men like us? Because something like that is an important topic to hit on, but I think coming from neighborhoods that we live in, it's not something that our minds is just instantly connected with. So how do you introduce such a topic like that?
That's a good question. I think the way I think about it is, you know, like I said, I grew up in Harlem, and, you know, I benefited from a lot of the social programs, the Great Society, all that stuff. And one of the things that made a difference to me was sincerity of the people who came to the community. You know, I mean, there was always insiders and outsiders, but there were some outsiders that got in because they proved themselves to be committed. I think for researchers, if I had to supervise researchers in the academy, I would teach them the whole thing of cultural humility. I think is a very good point, is that you really need to not go in with you have all the answers, because you don't. If you did, you wouldn't be in school, you know what I mean? So you need to go in to try to be educate yourself about what the needs are of the people, and also understand their perspective. So one of the things I can say about my partnership is one of the things that I do is the partnership is equal. You know, in other words, any communication that I get, I make sure that Mr. McQueen gets. When I did the funding, it's 50-50, as much as I can make it 50-50. And I know some academic institutions argue that, well, they should get most of the money because they have the expertise, they have all these other things. I can say that I've submitted grants with the budget of 50-50 or close to it, and I've never had a fund to tell me that my budget was off or that it was bad. In fact, some of them said it was very good. You know, they were impressed that I didn't pad it. So I say that in terms of, I guess, engaging community or getting, you're talking from the point of the academics, right? How should they come to the community? They should come with respect, humility, all those things that I had put up there, and a sharing, and willing to understand that you have something to offer, yes, but the community has something to offer you as well, and you need to take that into account when you're trying to have a partnership. So I think if you approach it that way, you might get young people like you more interested in it. The other thing is that, you know, I don't know exactly what neighborhood you grew up in, but being able to understand and listen to people, particularly young people, talk about their experiences and try to understand what they're saying instead of trying to tell them why they're saying the wrong thing and why they're thinking the wrong thing. That also is a big turnoff, and I think that training our young people who are going into research to be able to do that will go a long way establishing those kinds of connections.
Well, I have the mic, so I'll ask a question quickly. Renee Leham, a doctoral student, and thank you so much for today. I guess my question is, you said, Dr. Fully Love, that this is a room of melanin folks, and it's wonderful, and I think that these spaces are needed to have these kinds of candid conversations. But I'm wondering, what are your thoughts on the lack of diversity of our white allies and peers who are not in the room. I mean, African American students here at TC make up 13%, which I feel like is all of us right now. So if we're going to enact these changes, how do we broaden this audience, or is that even necessary?
A lot of the conversations we've had thus far have dealt with beginnings. How do you get something started? So I'm an old-time community organizer. The first thing they teach you is it's never the size of the crowd. The civil rights movement in the United States was not a mass movement. You didn't have millions and millions of folks in the black community doing whatever. What you had were some very key organizers making sure that whenever there were opportunities to present an agenda, to present a manifesto, that they were there. That whenever you needed to have somebody to turn out the vote or show up, you had folks who were doing exactly that kind of activity. In a small group, one hopes that if you get 5 or 6 people say, yeah, I've got a clear idea, I should be doing something, so that for whatever happens in the foreseeable future, they become engaged in looking for ways they can make a contribution, ways that they can become engaged and involved. Then I think it doesn't matter the size of the crowd or even the complexity or the complexion of the people who were there. If you produce folk who are really committed and engaged in making change, you've done the job. And I think that has always been what I think should be the highest goal of folks like us in settings like this, where we're trying not just to give the results of research, we're hoping that it inspires folks to go out and actually do something.
And I'll just add, 50% of my faculty colleagues, both of whom are still Caucasian, were here, as well as one of our doctoral students who's also a postdoc who has done pioneering research in the area of vitamin D and the extent to which it's associated with health disparities that largely impact African Americans. So we had diversity here as well. But I also just want to say that sometimes what it takes to form these partnerships that you asked about is merely standing up and making your presence known. I mean, that's what Renee actually did at a conference that's not unlike this, so that I noticed her. And when I had an opportunity to assist her, I was determined to assist her because I knew that this was indeed someone who was brilliant. So I'm sure that you've made the same impact, and things happen. Don't want to sit here and make promises, but the whole point is that it does start as simple as that. And that gentleman there has a question.
Hi, I'm Neil Flormon, senior in Eagle Academy. And my question is in regards of you guys, when you stated that in order to make these changes that we want to see in the community, it's necessary that we take the initiative to make the change that we want to see. But that's not always the case for students that don't really have these specific motivations to make these changes. I was fortunate enough to come from a background that pushes me to want to be successful. And my type of success, which is going to a higher education, I was also given a really good background in terms of school that really wants to see me succeed. But not every student is like that, and especially not every minority student is like that, where if their environment is focused around drugs, focused around things that are pretty detrimental to their health, to their future, then it's their future is most likely going to end up in when it comes to their future is most likely going to end up in jail, and probably not the most not the most optimal the future that they want.
I understand your point, and I think that the question that's within that is, there's some people who may not be motivated to take advantage of opportunities that might occur from partnerships, and what do you do with those people? I mean, that's sort of how I distilled your question. And my answer to that question is, one of the things that I've learned, let me just say this about myself for a little bit of disclosure. I used to be kind of a knucklehead when I was in public school. And it just took one teacher to say one thing to me that changed my life. And that one thing was telling my mother, when she had to be called in, he's never in his seat. But every time I ask him a question, he can answer it. He's clearly a very smart young man. And I was shocked. I was like, I didn't know she was watching me like that, you know. But the point I'm making is that there's sometimes those people who seem like they're not motivated or seem like they might not be interested. There may be other things going on, and they just need the right kind of motivation. Not that they don't have any, but they just need the right message to them to get that happen. So I'm always of the mind that if a student is not responding, I haven't been able to reach them. Now, there's some people who can't be reached, but I don't assume that going into the process.
Thank you. We are running 5 minutes over. So I want to thank Media Services. I want to thank Dr. Fully Love, Dr. Whaley, Kumpuhini Nanakarantama Bafo, our audience here and our audience at a distance. Thank you for your participation.